Oh, hello. Thanks for coming to see the race. I can't believe I won. It was a tough race out there, but I was so determined. And it was so close at the end with Mr. Williams and Mr. McDonald catching up. But I just heard this cheer from the crowd and it gave me a burst of energy. It made me feel so strong. It was unbelievable. You know, this might be one of the happiest moments of my life. Just seeing all these people happy, it made me feel so good. And to win as a girl against so many blokes, that makes me especially proud. Other than today, the streets have been so quiet. Everyone's just worried, I guess. You've seen it, right? And Dad says it's bound to get worse. More people out of work than ever. As if it wasn't bad enough already. I've got a friend who lives in a house with her whole family, including uncles and aunts and cousins. And their neighbours are the same. They can't afford anything. They're all out of work. So many families are just crammed into houses. Just the other day, I saw police officers with batons and sledgehammers forcing families out of their homes. I told Mum and Dad about it and they said it was happening all over the port. They assume it's happening everywhere. People just don't have enough money to pay for rent. They barely have money to pay for food. On the same day, I saw these children wearing rags standing in a queue for one of the soup kitchens. And it was so funny because despite everything, despite having nothing, the children were still laughing and playing. But their parents were a different story. You could see the look of worry in their face. And I've seen the same look in my parents' eyes when they don't think I'm watching. I just hope that today's race could give everyone a little bit of joy. You know, particularly girls, you know? And this is proof that we can do anything. We can do anything a boy can. Gosh, I mean, just give us a chance and who knows?
So we're talking about the date 1930. Port Adelaide's in the depths of the Great Depression. The economy was really suffering in South Australia throughout the 1920s. The stock market crash in 1929 sent it into free fall. So we have a very, very difficult situation for people living in the port. A lot of people are out of work. 35% at one stage were out of work in South Australia. You can imagine in a working class community where people are reliant on itinerant or casual work on the wharves, even harder. They talk about people crowding, you know, several families crowding into one dwelling in Port Adelaide, kids going to school barefoot. You know, there'd only be a couple of kids that even can afford shoes. They wear Hessian sacks some of the time because the family can't afford clothes, even with the ration tickets provided by the government. There was a quip in Port Adelaide that the family was into iron and steel as their line of business, which meant the woman took in ironing as domestic work and the husband stole what he could to make ends meet. So not great. Hilda would have remembered the 1928 strike. So a massive strike on the Port Adelaide waterfront. The government changed the conditions for wharf workers, so they were diminished. They could get less pay. There was a time when I think there was like 4,000 strikers on the waterfront, and there were violent clashes between the strike breakers, known as scabs, but often just people trying to make ends meet like anyone else. And they actually marched, the strikers marched from Port Adelaide to Outer Harbour to actually haul some of these strike breakers off the ships. So she would have had a vivid memory of that. The strikes went through to 1929 and there was still quite a lot of activity on the waterfront in the 1930s. So these long distance swims were incredibly popular. Some of the swimmers could make a career out of it, and they made sure the long distance swims were timed out through the year so they could attend all of them. This was a moment of community, so people came together to cheer on their favourite swimmer, and it was, you know, a rare moment of celebration, I guess, in the port. So when Hilda Harvey swam, they estimated there were between 3,000 and 4,000 spectators lining the course, and she records the, you know, hearing the cheering as she swam. So that's an incredible turnout for a sporting event in a waterside community. So swimming as a sport really became popular in Port Adelaide and everywhere else in South Australia in the 1920s, turn of the century. Before that, people bathed to keep cool, but there was segregation between the sexes. By the 1920s, you have 3 or 4 swimming clubs with pools along the Port River. So you had the first one was the Port Adelaide Amateur Swimming Club. Semaphore Swimming Club started at the same time. Then you had Rosewater, you had Ethelton and Birkenhead, which was over the river where Crookshanks Corner is. So all these young working class people were learning to swim, become better at swimming in the Port River in these illuminated swimming baths. And the long swim through Port Adelaide was one of several long distance swims that were very popular throughout the state. One was there was another one in the Torrens River, there was another one at Port Lincoln, I think. It started in 1923. So swimmers left from the end of Commercial Road at the steps, as they called, swam along the North Parade wharves into the Arm and then down the Port Canal. So it was 2.5 kilometres, gruelling swim, because obviously if you had high winds and rough waters, it took a lot longer. 1923, the Viceroy Tea Trophy, which was what the winner took home for a year, was first awarded, and men and women could compete. About 4 women won in the history of the event. The race continued until the 1960s, when they had to stop it because health authorities thought the Port River was a little bit unsanitary. So they stopped that, but a couple of years ago, the North Haven Surf Lifesaving Club reinstated the race. So now it still happens, but it happens in front of Harts Mill, and they tend to swim down to the Jervois Bridge and back.